asking the question, but he had asked, can we utilize virtual reality technology to allow people to see other things beyond the visual spectrum of light, from violet through to red? So I think he was suggesting that we might be able to use this technology to see right down into the ultraviolet spectrum, and right up into the ultraviolet spectrum, because it's quite a high frequency spectrum, and right down into the infrared spectrum. Have you found it?
This one, right? This one.
Is that it?
You mean all the questions here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And and actually, this is an interesting one. This is something that, because yes, you can already do that. Actually, if you use your phone camera, and just as a wee experiment, go and find an infrared remote control, television remote control for your hi-fi, whatever, and look at it through your phone's camera and press a button. You'll be able to see the infrared signal coming from there. So it can actually see into infrared and translate that into visible spectrum light by bringing it up from this very, very low frequency light that our eyes can't pick up on to something which is within that spectrum. Now, that can be done. Similarly, that can be done with the ultraviolet spectrum. Now, this would allow us, at the ultraviolet range, to be able to see like insects see, like bees and wasps and pollinators can see flowers, which is fascinating. So that's already possible. You could take this even further into the visual optic range of the mantis shrimp, which is just way wider than anything else. It's an incredibly old creature, but evolutionarily speaking, it hasn't been evolving for many, many billions of years, but it's got this incredible range of vision. However, what this questioner, Dominic, what was his name? I can't read that.
John Repcomis.
John.
I think he's here.
John Reed, was it? John. Sorry, it's too small a screen for me to read.
Okay.
John. Here we are. Rucalvis? We'll go with that. So John, thanks for the question. You also suggested being able to go into things like CT scanning and MRI scanning. Now, that might prove to be more difficult, because CT scanning and magnetic resonance imaging scanning, which is what MRI stands for, requires some fairly heavy equipment. And quite dangerous equipment. The MRI scanner has got such a powerful magnetic field that they have to make sure that oxygen tanks don't get within 3 meters of the chamber, because it will be sucked across the room at a speed like you wouldn't believe. You can't get into one of these scanners with if you have an earring on. It would literally rip the earring right from your head. So you've got to be very careful with that kind of thing. But maybe what you meant by that question was, could we use the binocular nature of virtual reality, the fact that we can see from both eyes and get a sense of scale and distance and perspective, in order to understand the images that are coming from an MRI scanner or a CT scanner better than just looking at it on the screen? In which case the answer is a resounding yes. That's a very, very good idea, actually. Just as I've noticed, I've got my earphones on at the moment so that I can hear you guys better and block out background noise. Earlier on, when I was doing the captioning for my video, I was just using a normal speaker, and I couldn't understand what one of the people was saying. So I ended up misquoting him in the captions. When I had the earphones on, it became incredible. Even though I'd listened to this section many, many times on a single speaker, listening to it on my headphones, I immediately could understand. I could hear it perfectly, because I was engaging both my ears. In the same way, engaging both your eyes to look at something which might not be so clear on a 2D screen, I think would allow radiologists and specialist scanning technicians to be able to observe and notice small details which could be obviously extremely important to the patient's ongoing welfare, like a very early carcinoma where the cancer might be too small to observe unless you're really getting down to details. So I think that's an incredibly interesting question. It's not something which I've researched directly, but you've piqued my interest now, so I'm going to go out and see what else I can find out about this. And Dominique and I are both quite active on LinkedIn, so if we discover anything, and as a follow-up to any of your questions, we'll tag you and we'll post it. We'll post the answers and talk about it in more detail there.
Yeah, actually, I just post some of the research that I find out to your question, so you can take a look. Like, it's a lot, yeah, and I pretty much, because my background is not medical. I'm a UX UI designer, and I can design like a interface for augmented reality. But I am really, really into XR. So that's why I started this meetup. And I Google a lot of professional term, and I find out, like, I think, we have a lot of different ways of learning. For example, we see, like, I think 70% or 80% of our learning is from eyes. So that's why, like, when we see things, when we hear things, when we use our hands, tangible, like immerse ourselves in the environment, I think the learning is probably like 100%. You can kind of recall, you can receive the information, and you can kind of perform the information much quickly than you just see the 2D data or 2D, like a CT scan or something 2D. And for example, if the doctor want to explain like the surgical procedure, it's hard to just show the patient like, 2D, 2D like films to tell her or him or her that, there's some problem here, we need to cut this out or something. Then the patient couldn't really, feel it and kind of, have a lot of questions. But if you put the patient inside his or her own body and kind of travel through and tell her that there's some problem here, and then we will do whatever, like use VR to show the demonstration. Like later on, we will do this to make sure you kind of get out of the problems. Then I think this is a better way to explain like how like a surgical procedure to the patients, and the patients will like more cooperate. Or like, like they will be more accept for every, like a surgical procedure. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point, Dominique, and I would totally agree with that. My background in virtual reality and augmented reality came from a background in marketing, which came from a background in psychology. And what I learned from that was that, and through my own personal experiences of surgery and kind of live testing on my body, that uncertainty leads to doubt, and doubt leads to fear. And these are the last things that you want when you're trying to battle an illness or understand surgery. That uncertainty can really generate a lot of unnecessary anxiety. And a lot of the things that we were looking at earlier on was just showing how the more familiar we are with things, the more comfortable we become with them, the less fearful we are. And that's just better all round in terms of pain management, and also just in terms of general well-being. Now, I remember sitting watching, I was having an endoscopy, which is where they put a camera down your throat into your stomach. And this isn't a very pleasant procedure, but they were showing me what they were seeing on the camera on a screen, and describing to me what was going on inside my stomach. And it was fascinating. And it gave me a real sense of understanding and agency and control over the whole situation, which I found very comforting. And it was nice to know what was going on in my insides, even though what was going on wasn't very good. At the time, it was probably quite bad news, but at least I knew what was going on, and that made me feel that I had more control. Also, my background is an engineering background. My family background is an engineering background, back to Watt, who was a designer of steam engines and power and electricity and so forth. But my immediate family were all teachers, and my mum came out with a really interesting phrase when I got into lecturing. She said, "I hear, I forget. I see, I remember. I do, I understand." And I thought, that is fascinating, because this is where we come in. It's doing. You, Dominique, is user experience, user interfaces. You're all about the doing. And that's what people truly remember and understand.
Yeah, and I think VR can truly like change people's perception of the world. For example, like a PTSD. Before I did the research and I saw one of the PTSD using VR to kind of heal the PTSD syndrome for the veteran. I think it's fun. It's really good. For example, it might be like a 60 days, like a program, or I don't know how long it is. But at the beginning, when it's similar to like online game or something, but it's in a war zone. So for example, like at the beginning, the veteran will take the VR goggle and see a lot of like, the scenery in war, and, like a gun shooting in a really severe, war zone, and you need to take a gun and shoot people or something. So at the beginning, it's kind of like a really intensive, like a war zone battlefield. And probably after 10 days, it becomes a little bit mild. For example, like there will not be a lot of like a gun or like like fighting. It becomes a little mild. And later on, it becomes like, oh, you are watching a war. You are not participating in a war. So it's kind of like trying to detach the war. Like later on, it becomes like, oh, probably like a little bit of war. You can hear the sound, but you are in a safe place with your family or with some normal people. And later on, at the end, it's like a normal life. There's no war anymore. So I think that's a pretty cool like program.
That's interesting. So it's almost the opposite of desensitizing people to those situations. Instead of gradually ramping up the level of engagement, you're ramping it down. This is a technique which is used in neurolinguistic programming, actually, where you're asked to visualize your problems and your issues and then picture them getting smaller and smaller and fainter and further away. But this is actually doing it for you, which, as we've seen repeatedly from the videos that we've been looking at, that seems to be where virtual reality works really well, is actually recreating and actively creating these environments that previously we had to actually get people to just imagine. Now we can kind of do it for them so that they can, I think that's a great idea though.
Yeah, I think that is like a change the whole perception, and so your behavior will change.
Because apparently moving out of active war zone situations and going on extended leave as a soldier can be extremely difficult, because your body and your brain have got used to that level of adrenaline, they've got used to that level of input. It kind of doesn't know how to adjust when you suddenly take it out. It's like when you, a far more severe version, I suppose, in our everyday lives that might be equivalent in a much lighter sense to when you leave a nightclub and it's been very, very loud, and you walk outside and you can almost hear the silence, it's so sudden and absent, it becomes a thing. And that can be very bewildering and disorientating for soldiers. Similarly, though, when we were going back to that example that I showed about the autism, or I described about using virtual reality for autistic people and people in the ASD, autistic spectrum, they almost need the opposite. They need to be gradually introduced to a new environment. And then you would gradually add sound and gradually add things that you're removing in the cases of the soldiers. So desensitization or resensitization in the case of what you're talking about. Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, right. And like before, you had another example, which is like a No Man's Sky or no. That game, and you talk about like, when you walk to that place, the stuff just simulate. It's similar to like there's a theory about the world. It's called simulation theory. It's like the world basically, I think according to Elon Musk's one talk with some people, he thinks this world is like 80%, I don't know how many percent, is highly likely to be simulated by another higher intelligence. And
hologram theory.
Yeah, right. So basically, maybe we are kind of being simulated. The reason why that a super high intelligent alien want to simulate us is because we are their ancestor. they want to preserve us. Yeah, that's a pretty cool. But yeah, I think maybe you know, like the simulation or something, because like according to Elon Musk saying like, oh, you see, like after 20 years we have something, like you see the computer graphics become so good compared to 20 years ago. Yeah. Like 20 years ago, nothing, you know. So according to the speed, we will hit like, you know, the top, and at the end we will eventually simulate our.
Well, you know, for anybody who's listening who thinks, oh, they're going down a rabbit hole here, or they're getting into sci-fi, actually, let's think about the statistical probabilities here. Like you say, Dominique, we're already getting to the stage where some of the stuff that even my team are generating is indistinguishable from reality. And so we will very quickly get to the stage where we can actually create extremely realistic environments, and we can create artificial intelligences which I don't know that they're artificial intelligences, that we're really not far off. But thinking about if we got to that stage, we could potentially create limitless numbers of realities, thousands, millions of them. So statistically speaking, the chances of us being in a real reality that isn't a hologram, right, is 1. The chances of us being in one of the many millions or billions of artificially generated realities is countless, limitless. So actually, it is statistically more probable that we're in a virtual reality, that we're not real, than that we are. But then again, what is real? Because I read a book a few years ago that was dealing with this, because they were talking about, okay, what if you ran a simulation of a situation that you wanted to be so accurate that you created everything right down to each individual person, their life, their history, their thoughts, their dreams? What would happen when you'd finished with that simulation, when it achieved what it needed to achieve for you, when you'd worked out, okay, well, statistically, if we put a train here, it's going to pick up this many passengers, or some nebulous thing that you were doing with it. Could you then switch off that simulation? Wouldn't that be genocide? Yeah, because these people would be real. They would think they were real. So switching them off would be killing them all in the blink of an eye. So this was the interesting thought experiment, I guess, was if you were a benevolent society and you were creating the simulations, you would have to keep them running. And therefore, you would end up with countless simulations, each unaware of the other simulations, or even that they were simulations, but you couldn't switch them off because it would be unethical. And again, this increases the likelihood that we are more likely to be in one than not in one. So it's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah, and then like one of the theory is really fun. It's like similar to game, you know, the high intelligence or somebody pick up some certain heroes. The reason why that's why some people start arguing that, oh, why some people are misfortune and some people are really fortunate. So some people figure out, some philosophy just figure out that maybe there are some people are picked up by the aliens, or by natural they are the hero or they are the main character, and the rest of the simulation are background people. So that's why you can see some miserable human beings there. And then so that's why we are all simulation, but we have a story. And you can see why some people are more lucky or become the leader, and some people are the background, miserable people. So that's another theory.
So if it was a game, yeah, you would end up with avatars and heroes, and you would end up with those guys that just stand there chopping wood all the time.
Yeah,
and don't really serve any other function. But I suppose the simulation theory would have it that you would have to treat everybody arbitrarily. You'd have to treat everybody the same in terms of likelihood of fortune or misfortune, or it would skew the simulation. So it's interesting. You can bet that you can see that I'm from a largely secular society, given that I prefer the simulation theory, that it's just luck, one way or the other, you know. But what I find it really interesting about this, actually, what all the stuff that we're talking about, is sort of really accurate simulations. If we bring this back to therapeutic benefit, I've met people with paraplegia and people with muscular sclerosis and various other conditions which leave them housebound. Now, having experienced what it's like to be trapped in to a much lesser extent than they are, but certainly I was just trapped inside my house. But when you have a healthy mind and an unhealthy body, it's an extremely distressing situation, and you crave the freedom to be able to go outside. You crave the freedom to be able to travel, but you can't have it. It's something that we are kind of innately born with. We're kind of nomadic hunter-gatherers fundamentally. If you look at this from an evolutionary perspective, we like to move, you know. And what virtual reality allows for is the ability to, even if your body won't allow you to move, that your mind can go anywhere. Just like the boy in the autism, Max in the autism video, he was able to use Google Maps virtual reality to just go anywhere in the world, and it gave him that freedom. And I know people who have physical disabilities who are using it for that same reason. And also taking yourself into a natural environment with greenery, trees. We're hopefully going to be creating an environment that will be voiced by our famous naturologist, David Attenborough, which is for meditation and for relaxation. And it's going to be mountains and trees and waves coming in on a loch, which is the Scottish equivalent of a lake. And he will be voicing over a kind of a meditation track. But it's been proven that people heal more quickly from physical injuries if they can see trees and grass, if they can get that kind of greenery, blue skies and everything like that. It actually physically speeds up their healing. So these are all potential benefits for immersion in new environments. It's the freedom it can give you, and the access to some simulation of nature, which some people just may not be able to get otherwise, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree with like the simulation stuff. It can totally change the way people perceive the world and change their mind. For example, like a meditation or like, yeah. So I think in the future, everything will merge together. I think maybe working, when you do the work, when you play the game, and when you learn something, I think three of them will come together. So you look at the examples that I show. Like, for example, you use like a virtual reality and like a multiple player, and you start doing some stuff, which is fun. You see, like you make it like a gamification. So you don't feel like you are working. You feel like, oh, you are playing games. But you are actually learning and working and, learning, working, and playing games. So that's...
Well, yes, because I don't have any children yet, but I was always concerned that when I did have children, that I would, how would I deal with them spending too much time playing computer games? Because I would be a hypocrite to stop them from doing that, because I used to spend endless hours playing Mario Kart and that kind of thing, Street Fighter. And back then it was, you would maybe have a friend over to play two-player games with, but there was no online connections. Most of the time it was quite a solitary pursuit. And I was thinking, I can't tell my children when I have them, oh, you can't do that, because I did. However, the way that it is now, and even for a number of years, when the Wii came out and the Kinect, which can sense where your body is and what pose it's in, already you could reach out to people anywhere in the world and engage in yoga classes with them, where it was actually teaching you accurate poses, and at the same time you're getting to meet people from all around the world and have conversations with them. So it's super social and super educational, and yet fun and enjoyable, and you can do it from home. And I was thinking, by the time I do have kids, they'll probably be learning how to be a ninja master,
That's
proper
cool.
swordplay and stuff like that, with somebody from, I don't know, Southwestern Territories of Australia, that they would never otherwise get to meet. So, I think that the opportunities for people to learn as they socialize is fantastic. But then again, you see how people socialize in first-person shooter games, and it's not the most, what's the word? Sociable. They tend to just shoot each other and swear at each other a lot. So we may need a degree of behavioural control in these situations just to make people behave, at least as they would in the real world, with a
Yeah.
decent politeness to each other.
Yeah, I think in the future, like everything will become one, and like a neural link, like it's kind of like we are connected to the internet. Before we need to use like a phone or a computer to access it, but now it's all our conscious, right? We use our conscious to simulate the world, and we access the internet or access all the information directly. So there's no gap, like 5G, there's no latency.
No,
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Kurzweil, I think, Kurzweil was a statistician, is a statistician, and he's interested in technology, and he basically charted the on a timeline curve the adoption of mass communication technology everywhere from the invention of the written word to the invention of papyrus paper, to the invention of the printing press, which allowed people to recreate the written word. So basically, the written word allowed us to transfer knowledge from one generation to the other accurately, and to between people who had never met. Then the printing press allowed us to do this instead of having to get scribes that painstakingly write out every single book by hand. You could print out many, many books, which meant that information was spread very, very far and fast. Then we got into things like lithographs, where it got to be colour and you could use imagery and so forth. Then we got to, now where were we? Typewriters, which meant that you didn't have to have a printers. Anybody in their own home could create type. And then we started getting in the direction of computers. But first of all, it was one or two big code-breaking computers in the wars in the world. Then there was one in every country, then one in every city, then one in every library in every city, then one in every home with a micro PC, which I can remember myself because I was born in the 70s. And then it got to the stage where instead of having one in every home, you could actually carry them around in your briefcase as a laptop computer. And then you got mobile phones, so you were carrying them. Everybody had one in their pocket, right? And now you've got smart watches and things that are connected to your ears, and obviously tablets and so forth. And the next step is inevitable. Well, here's what Kurzweil discovered. The distance of time between each of these examples that I gave you, it halved every time. So the amount of time it took between the written word and papyrus, the amount of time it took between papyrus and the printing press and the typewriter, the computer and the microcomputer and so on, was halved every time, which we call an exponential growth curve, because it doubles, it basically accelerates continuously. And so the next step is inevitably that the devices continue to get smaller and more localized and more ubiquitous, more commonplace, and that would be implants. That would be, we're either wearing them on our faces, which might be the next step, augmented reality glasses, or we might actually just have direct brain interfaces. And I know some people who are involved in direct brain interface technology, it's amazing how sophisticated it's getting already, the things that you can control with it. And it's not even invasive, it's just you wear them,
Yeah. So, in the future, we can all upload our thoughts to the giant human cloud, and our soul will never die. Our thoughts will never die. Just live there. Cyber.
Well, but there is another way of looking at this, which is our consciousness, is our life and our kind of soul, is it just the accumulation of our memories, or is it can you separate it from the body? And that sounds very philosophical, but let's go back to the kind of physical nature of our thoughts. Our brain is really just a concentration, one of the concentrations of neurons in our bodies. There are neurons throughout our bodies, throughout our nervous system, right down to our tips of our toes. There's actually the second highest concentration of neurons in our body after our brain is in our stomach. The theory is that it's to recognize the foods which are good for us and the foods which are bad for us. So that's, it can respond. Hence, pregnant women getting cravings for foods that they, maybe only ever had once in their life. The body knows that the baby requires this nutrient, so therefore it sends a signal to the brain saying, I need avocado. And they get these weird food cravings for like avocado with ice cream, that kind of thing. But the other thing that was raised in a book that I read when I was much younger, it was a Terry Pratchett book, was how could a ghost or a spirit, a disembodied spirit, be angry when anger requires adrenaline, testosterone, even in women, and glands to produce and secrete those chemicals in order to affect the brain, to affect the responses, to make them work in the same way. How can we feel love without oxytocin and estrogen, and testosterone and progesterone? These things are chemical. So can we upload our consciousness to the cloud and it still be us? Would we behave in the same way? Or would we have to place a kind of an algorithm in there, and to make us behave in the same way? In which case, is it still us, or is it just a simulation? These are all philosophical questions, but I love the fact that we're getting into this field where we have to start asking these questions. We passed right from philosophy through science and right out the other side back into philosophy again, being required, because science is all about testing and measuring. Philosophy is about suggesting and playing with concepts. We can't test and measure these concepts because they haven't happened yet. So we have to use philosophy. It's fascinating, really.
Yeah,
I like to think of this as a new renaissance of technology, because everything's being brought together, like you say, but even the skills that people use are being brought together. The kind of people that we work with in augmented and virtual reality are we have to work with people like yourself, UI and UX specialists, people like myself with that kind of vague mishmash of backgrounds between medical and computer and marketing and psychology or whatever. But then
wow.
I know, I'm 43. I've had a chance to do a lot of things, but then some of the people that I'm working with make me look as if I've been twiddling my thumbs all my life, because they are my head of VFX is a professional award-winning composer for films. And as well as being a 3D expert, but I know other people who are games designers, animators, storyboard artists, and they need to be all of these things in order to make augmented and virtual reality work, because it is all of these things. So basically what we need is polymaths. We don't need people who only know how to do one thing. And so having somebody like Krill, who was speaking to us earlier on, who has a background in digital communications and web development, but also biology, that's vital, yeah? Because he's got enough of an understanding of both to be able to actually bring what is required to actually creating a biology interface.
Yeah, that's so true, because I believe, because a lot of people are afraid of AI, right? Artificial intelligence will take over our job, but actually you see like all the tools become so easy. For example, like before making an AR app, it's really hard. Like 10 years ago, it's almost like you need to become super intelligent and you need to learn code like the top one, like a programmer. But you see, my background is designer. I can create my own AR app, like with the Unity. And some of the developers, they kind of like, oh God, all the tools become so easy. Even a designer without any like a coding background can make an AR app. So I feel like right now all the tools, like for example, you can go to Shutterstock, buy a lot of like a template for poster design, or you can go to a lot of, like for example, like a design. Like I remember a few years ago, Alibaba just invented like a software where you can generate, like AI can generate a lot of good graphic banners for ads, for Google ads, Facebook ads. They can generate according to the data and best performance performing ads. They can, and you know, I saw a lot of robots, they start painting, you know, do a beautiful painting. Like, so I feel like, what's the point of having an artist here, right? So I feel like right now, all the tools become so easy. So we have to learn different fields, you know, so we can come up with ideas, with visions, and get the boring, dirty work to the robot. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I mean, we're always, it's inevitable to be a bit afraid of change, and I think a lot of people are, but that's just because it's uncertain. But if we look at history, if we look at the precedents, we can see that this change isn't necessarily a negative thing, and it's usually a positive thing. The Luddites were famous for breaking up looms, basically looms which allowed weavers to weave very, very quickly. There were machines that allowed us to weave cloth very, very quickly. And the Luddites thought, well, this is going to destroy our jobs. All these weavers are not going to have jobs anymore. So they came and smashed all the looms. This wasn't all that they did. They did a lot of more interesting stuff, but they were wrong. I mean, it's not like the world is full of out-of-work weavers. We just moved on and did other things, and you know, it means that you don't have to spend your entire time doing something which is manual and menial and really kind of beneath us. You know, once we have machines that can do that kind of thing, we should let them do that kind of thing, because what we are good at is creative and strategic thought, bringing together different and disparate skills and disciplines and observations, and coming up with new ideas. That's what we're good at. Creativity, raw creativity. When they brought out the camera and camera film, they thought, well, we won't need painters anymore to take portraits. Well, that's not true. We still paint. We don't do it because we have to. We do it because we want to, you know. And everybody takes photos, but there's still room for that creativity. It hasn't bled it out. But I'll tell you what else is interesting. If you look at throughout history at the cultures which made the biggest leaps forward in thought and civilization and society, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Greeks, the Romans, what did they all have in common? Slaves. They all had slaves doing all the grunt work, doing all the dirty work, freeing them up to think. Now, fortunately, we shouldn't need slaves anymore. There are countries where they still very much exist on different forms, but our slaves are machines for the most part in the developed nations. Washing machines, dishwashers, anything which takes away from that manual menial labor frees us up to think and do other things with our minds, like go on Facebook and look at cat videos.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I think if we can let all the robot or AI do the repetitive work or like a non-creative work, and everyone become entrepreneur, we get like a universal basic income, and everyone has like a, you know, start realize their own dream. I think that's a pretty good, like a positive side of the future. I don't know the negative side. Everyone is talking about negative side. Like the sci-fi movie, everyone will die something.
Well, that's it. You've got your dystopian futures and utopian futures, and you're very much talking about the utopian one. But if my life has taught me nothing else, it's that you can't achieve something positive without visualizing it and having a very clear idea of what you want to achieve. If you constantly focus and make a very clear picture of the negatives, that's what you'll get. Your brain is very good at realizing these things.
Yeah, the world is like whatever you perceive is the world, right? Everyone's world is inside his head, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's world. Yeah. So I think, it's good. Just look at the positive side, that we can free our hands and we do something that we always want to do.
Yeah. I mean, again, it sounds like we're getting wishy-washy and kind of spiritual thinking about this, but it's not. There's an actual psychophysiological precedence for this, that the bits of your brain where you visualize outcomes, just like we were talking about from the therapeutic perspective, once you've visualized that outcome, once you've really felt it and seen it and heard it and smelt it in your mind, that bit of your brain goes, okay, so that's real, is it? And then it makes these many, many millions of tiny little decisions to achieve that outcome. So if you do have a very pessimistic viewpoint, you will tend to find yourself living a fairly negative life. Anything which you could possibly have had an input on, you will have made that tiny input. You can see it in people who self-sabotage when they achieve success. They don't believe they deserve that success, so either in lots of little ways or sometimes in single, quite major ways, they sabotage that success. Whereas optimistic people don't. Optimistic people have a sense of entitlement. So when they are offered something really good, even if they don't deserve it, even if they're not qualified for that job, they'll go, yeah, fine, I'll do it. Because they feel like they're entitled to it. And that sense of entitlement is, if we could have that as a society, that we're entitled to that utopian future, that we're entitled to universal basic wage and machines doing all the grunt work and us lolling about drinking cocktails and coming up with cool ideas, then, we might be able to achieve it. But also there's the fear that artificial intelligence and the machines, like in some kind of Skynet, Terminator way, are going to be our enemies. But if we go back to Kurzweil's theory about us, and exactly as you were saying actually before, that we will end up with implants and we'll therefore be able to communicate with each other directly without the need for a phone or a computer or anything like that, then we cease to be distinct individual consciousnnesses and become almost like an ant's nest or a beehive, almost a single collective intelligence, a singularity, as Kurzweil called it. But also, while we're developing together and while all of these developments have been occurring, the Internet of Things, as again you rightly mentioned, all these objects in our life are getting smarter and are connecting together to the extent where our fridge is talking to our watch, is talking to our phone so that it knows when we're getting home, and the cooker is talking to all of these things, and it can start, in your central heating system. All these are effectively little nodes of intelligence getting smarter and more ubiquitous and more interconnected. Think of it like neurons or nerve endings on the skin of the world. And once we're connected to each other, we're connected to them. So that single collective intelligence isn't just us communicating with each other, it's us communicating with all of these machines. So therefore the AI isn't separate from us, it's part of us.
It's similar to Elon Musk's theory. It's like, if you cannot beat it, you be part of it. Right? You be friends with them. So if we cannot, if AI is becoming smarter and smarter, and they will be much smarter than human beings, then let's get part of AI into us, and we kind of become one. So there's no competition because we are friends, or AI and human. Thing. Yeah, we are one thing. We are like Terminators. So so I think that's a pretty cool concept. We are not against each other, we are collaborating.
Yeah, we're all a single entity, although of course that is also scary because then you're thinking Borg or Cybermen or whatever, but it could be a good thing. It could be a good thing. We just never know.
Cool.
So I saw that there were a bunch of other questions on your feed there. Were there other ones that we can maybe answer?
Okay, let me see.
I'll have a quick look at mine as well and see if there's anything come up on my LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. Okay, here. I think this one is the main question, and this one is he wants to stream post talking online. Yeah, so we did it. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so that's pretty much the question. Okay. Any other questions?
Anybody else listening in who's got any other questions for us?
Huh?
No. Excellent. Okay.
Okay, cool. And I want to say that before I hit the wrong button, I hit the video button, but actually I need to hit the record button. But I am really fortunate to record the Q&A section, the fun part. And I didn't record two of our videos. So I think we can kind of combine the videos and then put this Q&A. Q&A is fully recorded. Yeah,
well,
I need to apologize.
That's good news, actually, because I want to actually change some of the subtitles on mine anyway, so that's actually great news.
Because my subtitle is even your name spelling wrong. So
yeah, what was my name? Is it Dawn or something like that? It was
D-E-B. I think because my accent. Dave. Yeah, I think my accent. Yeah, so
I
that's
like Deb. I could be a Deb. That's
okay. Deborah,
no, but
Deborah.
no, but that's good. But certainly, yeah, I can redo that. But it's been really fun, Dominique, and thank you so much for
Yeah,
asking me
thank
to join
you.
in.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we can have some like something in the future that we can have like a one, I don't know, webinar, workshop or something, or talking about some books. Because I know like you know a lot, like from from everything that I talk, and you can kind of elaborate, which is amazing. 'Cause I haven't seen anybody who can kind of catch up the topics like that fast and elaborate, make it so deep. Because I'm kind of busy, and I think you are really like a smart and you read a lot. And I think maybe we can have, I don't know, like book workshop or reading some cool books. I don't know,
That
talking
would be
about
awesome. Actually, we could have a chat about maybe the science fiction or the science fact or the philosophies that
yeah,
we've read. That, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I'm
philosophy.
up for that.
That's super cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's discuss like how we can catch these types of vibe, and
Mhm.
maybe we can form something that is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And anybody else who's still listening, if you guys have any other questions or if there's any subjects that you'd like to learn more about, well, Dominique is the webmaster here, so she'll be able to facilitate
I
any
hit the
other
wrong
subjects you
button.
might have.
I'm not a master. I hit the video button, which is like a video myself, not the recording button. Yeah, I messed up.
You name a webmaster who hasn't made a mistake like that in the past.
Okay, yeah,
This is
sure.
how you learn.
But I'm glad that I record all the Q&A section.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
awesome.
didn't record like a 2 of our pre-record videos. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to record anything, this was the bit to record. Awesome.
That's the
Well,
best. Okay.
well, thank you again, Dominique. It was a real pleasure, and I look forward to doing this again soon.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk. Yeah.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.